A harsh fluorescent light hummed in the corridor of Giovanni Moretti's private clinic. The midnight halls were sterile and silent, smelling of antiseptic. Lauren, one of the Moretti family's maids, crept out of a supply room with her back pressed to the door. In her arms she cradled a small bundle wrapped tightly in a white blanket. Her chestnut hair hung in sweaty strands around her face, which was marred by a fresh bruise on her cheekbone. Both of her hands were bandaged, and they trembled as she clutched the bundle to her chest. Every few steps, she glanced over her shoulder with wide, fearful brown eyes. She had hoped to slip away unseen, but fate was not so kind. Giovanni Moretti emerged around the corner ahead, a tall silhouette beneath the dim hallway lights. He moved with the quiet, predatory grace of a panther. Black ink tattoos curled up his strong forearms where his sleeves were rolled. His sharp gaze locked on Lauren immediately, and his dark brows drew together in recognition. This was his private clinic. No one should be here at this hour without his permission. "Lauren." Giovanni's voice cut through the silence, low and commanding. He stepped forward, blocking her path. Lauren froze, clutching the bundle tighter. Her heart thudded so loudly it filled her ears. She had seen Giovanni from afar at the mansion, but never had his steely attention pinned her like this. Giovanni's gray eyes flicked from her pale, anxious face to the object in her arms. "It's past midnight. What are you doing here?" he demanded softly. The calm in his tone was deceptive. Lauren could sense the danger coiled beneath. I'm sorry, sir," she managed, lowering her eyes. "I was just—" She edged back a step, as if distance could somehow save her. But Giovanni closed the gap in an instant. He was inches from her now, towering and unyielding. Under the harsh lights, Giovanni noted the bruise on her cheek and the state of her bandaged hands. His jaw tightened. "You're hurt," he said. "What happened?" Lauren's mouth went dry. She shifted the bundle slightly, drawing his attention to it again. "I fell, sir," she whispered. "Just needed some bandages." Giovanni's gaze darted to the slightly ajar supply closet behind her and back. "At this hour? Without informing anyone?" he asked coldly. Lauren's pulse raced. "I didn't want to bother anyone. I'm fine now, really." It was a weak lie, and they both knew it. Giovanni's eyes narrowed. "You're hiding something." It wasn't a guess. It was an accusation. Lauren shook her head quickly. "No, sir, A tiny whimper came from within the bundle. Giovanni went rigid. His attention snapped to the blanket in her arms. "What was that?" he said dangerously low. "Nothing," Lauren whispered, desperation in her voice. But then a second sound answered, an unmistakable soft cry. In a flash, Giovanni's hand darted out and flipped back a fold of the blanket. Lauren gasped but didn't resist as the blanket fell open, revealing a tiny, flushed face. A newborn baby lay bundled against her chest, its mouth open in a trembling wail. Giovanni stared as if he'd been struck. The Mafia boss's hardened expression cracked with shock. He raised a hand, almost touching the infant's cheek in disbelief, then caught himself. His voice, when it came, was a harsh whisper. "Whose child is this?" Lauren's eyes brimmed with tears. There was no escape now. Every fiber of her being told her to protect her baby, even if it meant facing Giovanni's wrath. "It's mine," she choked out, her voice barely audible over the blood rushing in her ears. For a heartbeat, Giovanni didn't react. He simply stared at her, at the baby, as if trying to fit the pieces together. Lauren, the quiet maid, had a baby hidden away? His mind churned with unspoken questions, chief among them who was the father. She could see it in the clench of his jaw. "Yours," he repeated slowly. The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. "Who is the father?" Giovanni's tone was deadly calm, the eye of a brewing storm. Lauren couldn't speak. Her throat constricted in fear. What could she possibly tell him? She held her baby closer, tears spilling onto her cheeks. Giovanni's patience was at its limit. He seized her elbow in an iron grip and leaned in. "Explain, now." Authority in his voice made it clear. Refusal was not an option. Lauren opened her mouth, heart pounding, but nothing emerged. How could she explain this? By morning, his brother was missing. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the Moretti Mansion's grand hall as Lauren quietly went about her morning chores. Dressed in a crisp black and white maid's uniform, she moved like a ghost across the marble floors, swift, efficient, and almost invisible. The Moretti estate was enormous, a labyrinth of elegant rooms with gilded moldings, crystal chandeliers, and polished floors. It could overwhelm anyone. But after a few months of working here, Lauren had learned to navigate the halls in silence. Being unnoticed was part of the job. She preferred it that way. If the family didn't notice her, it meant she wasn't in trouble. This morning, Lauren was on her knees polishing a mosaic in the foyer, the marble cool beneath her. Other staff dusted and swept at the edges of her vision. As she buffed the last tile, the sound of approaching footsteps made her snap to attention. Giovanni Moretti had just come through the front doors, flanked by his consigliere and a bodyguard. Lauren immediately averted her eyes and pressed herself back to make way, her heart thumping. Giovanni's polished shoes slowed as he noticed her working. Lauren kept her gaze down, focusing intently on an imaginary speck of dirt on the floor. She felt his eyes on her for a moment. The air thickened with tension. Then, without a word, Giovanni continued on, his entourage in tow. Only after the echo of his footsteps faded up the grand staircase did Lauren let out the breath she'd been holding. "That was close," murmured Maria, a fellow housekeeper, as she passed Lauren with a feather duster in hand. "You nearly got stepped on, dear." "I'm okay," Lauren whispered back, managing a faint smile. Inside, her nerves still hummed. Even a brief crossing of paths with the boss set her on edge. Giovanni Moretti had a well-earned reputation for ruthlessness. Everyone on staff knew the story of a footman who'd broken a valuable vase last month. He was fired on the spot and never seen around here again. Some said he'd left with bruises for his clumsiness. True or not, the warning was clear. Mistakes were not tolerated in this household. Lauren finished her task and slipped away down the servants' corridor. Eager to avoid any more close encounters, she spent the next several hours rotating through the upstairs rooms, dusting endless bookshelves in the library, airing out the velvet drapes in the sitting room, scrubbing an already spotless marble bathroom until it gleamed. It was demanding work, but it kept her mind busy and, more importantly, kept her away from any volatile members of the family. By early afternoon, the staff were allowed a short break for lunch. In the bustling kitchen below stairs, Lauren collected a simple meal of soup and a roll and found a quiet corner at the worn wooden table that the servants shared. She pulled out her phone as she ate, hoping for a message from her younger sister. Sure enough, Brittany had texted her an hour ago. "Hey, the utility bill came and it's higher than we thought. I can pick up an extra shift at the diner. Let me know." Lauren pressed her lips together, a familiar pang of worry flaring in her chest. She typed back quickly with one hand. "Don't stress, Britt. I'll figure it out. We'll talk tonight. Love you." She hoped the assurance would put her sister at ease. Brittany was only 19 and juggling night classes at community, college along with her part-time job. Ever since their mom passed away, it had been just the two of them trying to stay afloat. Lauren had taken this live out, maid job at the Moretti estate precisely, because it paid better than anything else she could find, and she could still go home each evening to be with Brittany. The debts from their mother's hospital stay were overwhelming, but Lauren didn't want Brittany to sacrifice school to work more. "I'll find a way," she vowed to herself as she often did. A new text notification lit up Lauren's phone, drawing her from her thoughts. Expecting Brittany's reply, she opened it and immediately felt her blood turn to ice. The message was from an unfamiliar number. "Your sister's life depends on you. Meet me in the south garage at midnight. Come alone. Tell no one." Lauren reread the text, heart hammering against her ribs. "Your sister's life depends on you." She nearly dropped the phone. "Who? Why?" Her eyes raced over the words again. "The south garage, here at the estate at midnight. Come alone. Tell no one." Her hand shook as she locked the screen and glanced around the kitchen. The other staff were busy chatting or eating. No one was looking her way. Panic rose in her throat. Who could have sent this terrifying ultimatum? The message gave no name, just instructions and a threat. Her first instinct was to call Brittany right away, to make sure she was okay, but she stopped herself. If this was real, if someone was watching, contacting her sister might put Brittany in danger. Lauren forced herself to take a slow breath. Think. Could it be a prank? A cruel joke from a random number? But how would anyone know to mention the south garage, an area of the estate normally off-limits to outsiders? And her sister? A cold certainty settled in Lauren's stomach. This was not a joke. Someone knew about Brittany and had access to the estate. Someone who wanted Lauren, specifically, alone at midnight. She thought of the Morettis. Many enemies. People who might use an innocent like her as leverage. Or could it be an inside threat? One of the Moretti men themselves? A memory of a sly, predatory smile flashed in her mind. Marco Moretti, Giovanni's younger brother, notorious for toying with the help when he was around. Marco wasn't often at the mansion, but if he was, would he stoop to something like this? The uncertainty gnawed at her. All through the remainder of the day, Lauren carried that dread with her like a weight. She tried to continue her work, polishing mirrors, tidying bedrooms, on autopilot. But her mind kept returning to the message. "Meet me in the south garage at midnight." The words pulsed in her memory. As evening fell, the mansion grew quieter. Lauren finished ironing the last of the day's laundered linens and realized, with a start, that it was nearly 11 p.m. Most of the staff had already left or retired to their quarters. Normally, Lauren would be on her way home by now, but the cryptic threat kept her rooted in place. Every instinct screamed at her to find help, alert the gate guards, or even beg Giovanni for protection. Yet the text's warning echoed in her mind. Tell no one. She couldn't risk Brittany's life by defying it. Heart-pounding, Lauren grabbed her coat from the servants' cloakroom and slipped it on over her uniform. She clutched her phone in a clammy hand as she crept through the back hallway toward the south wing. A heavy door at the end of the corridor led to the underground garage where the family's cars were kept. Lauren pushed it open, and a cool draft of oil-tinged air hit her face. The concrete ramp and rows of parked luxury vehicles cast long shadows under the low lights. The garage was silent except for the faint electric hum of the lights. Midnight was only moments away. Lauren stepped forward into the gloom of the garage, alone and afraid, bracing herself for whatever she might find in the darkness. As Lauren pressed herself against a concrete pillar in the dark garage, her mind flashed back to Marco Moretti and the encounter she'd had with him just days ago. It was late afternoon and Lauren had been dusting the parlor shelves when Marco strolled in. Giovanni's younger brother exuded an easy confidence that filled the space. He wore a cream-colored suit, no tie, the top buttons of his shirt undone in casual fashion. A heavy gold signet ring marked with the Moretti crest gleamed on his right hand. Lauren had greeted him quietly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Moretti," and hoped he would continue on. Instead, Marco paused in the doorway, eyeing her with open curiosity. "Good afternoon, Lauren," he drawled, letting her name roll off his tongue. Her stomach flipped nervously. She kept her eyes lowered and continued dusting a glass decanter on the sideboard. Marco didn't move from the door. "Don't let me interrupt," he said. "I was just looking for a drink. It's been a long day." "I can get that for you, sir," Lauren offered. She opened the liquor cabinet and retrieved a half-full decanter of whiskey and a clean, crystal tumbler. Before she could pour, Marco was suddenly at her shoulder. He reached around her, his arm brushing against hers, and took the decanter from her hand. "Allow me," he murmured near her ear. Lauren's breath caught. She could feel the warmth of him at her back. She stepped aside swiftly, putting a foot of distance between them. Marco poured himself a generous measure of whiskey. He took a slow sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. "You've been with us, what, a few months now?" he asked casually, swirling the amber liquid. "Yes, sir. Around 6 months," Lauren replied, clasping her hands to hide their unease. Marco nodded and let his gaze drift over her, toe to head in one leisurely sweep. "Giovanni's so strict hardly lets the staff breathe. I'm surprised. I never noticed someone as lovely as you until now." Lauren felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, focusing on a spot on the carpet. She wished he would take his drink and leave, but he lingered. "You always rush home after your duties, don't you?" Marco continued, "So eager to see your little sister." "Brittany, right?" Lauren's blood ran cold at the mention of Brittany's name. She forced herself to meet his eyes. There was a playful curve to his lips, but something dangerous flickered beneath. "Yes, I go home to take care of her," Lauren said carefully. How did he even know her sister's name? Marco stepped closer, lifting a hand as if to adjust an imaginary strand of Lauren's hair. She went still as a statue. "That's admirable," he said softly. "Family means everything. You'd do anything to take care of her, I'm sure." "Of course," Lauren replied, barely above a whisper. He smiled. "Good. And is this job paying you enough to do that? To take care of all her needs?" Lauren swallowed hard. "It's been generous, sir," she lied. In truth, every dollar was stretched thin, but admitting that felt too vulnerable under his predatory gaze. Marco chuckled. "Generous? Giovanni's never been generous a day in his life. He took another sip of whiskey, then set the glass down. If you ever needed extra help, I hope you'd come to me. I'm always willing to assist a loyal employee. His tone was smooth, but the insinuation hung in the air between them. Lauren's palms grew damp. She understood exactly what he was implying. Her heart beat a wild rhythm in her chest, but she managed to answer. Thank you for the offer. Mr. Moretti, I'll keep that in mind. Marco's eyes darkened for a fraction of a second at her polite deflection. He leaned in, not quite touching her, but close enough that she felt the aura of his power and the latent threat in his words. You do that, he said, voice just above a whisper. Loyalty and gratitude are rewarded in this house. I'd hate for you to struggle or feel unappreciated. Lauren felt a faint tremble in her knees. I appreciate the family's concern, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Marco studied her for a long moment, the silence pulsing. Finally, he eased back and flashed a disarming grin. Well, I should let you get back to work. Wouldn't want Giovanni thinking I'm distracting. His best maid. He picked up his glass and downed the remaining whiskey in one gulp. As he turned to leave, he paused at her shoulder. Oh, one more thing. Lauren held her breath, her whole body rigid. Marco leaned in so close that from afar it might look like a lover's whisper. Don't ever lie to me about being fine, he murmured, voice silky but laced with menace. I can always tell. His hand briefly touched her back, almost a guiding pat, but the pressure of his palm was possessive. The gesture made her skin crawl. Then, as if nothing had happened, he walked away, picking up his car keys from the table. At the doorway, he glanced back. Get some rest tonight, Lauren. You have a big day tomorrow. The remark was oddly charged, carrying an implication she didn't understand. Before she could respond, he flashed a final smile and disappeared into the hall, whistling a tuneless melody. Lauren stood there in the empty parlor for a long minute, trying to steady her breathing. Her palms were clammy around the feather duster's handle. What on earth had that been? A warning? A threat? She felt as though she'd just escaped a trap by the skin of her teeth. She collected the whiskey decanter with trembling hands, glad to have an excuse to busy herself. On the shelf where Marco had leaned, something caught her eye, a faint oily smudge where his ring had pressed into the polished wood. She wiped it away, but an uneasy feeling lingered. As she left the parlor, Lauren couldn't shake the sense that Marco's parting words were not a casual wish. A big day tomorrow. The phrase looped in her mind, heavy with a meaning she couldn't grasp. Why would he say that? Back in the present, hidden in the shadows of the South Wing garage, Lauren's heart thumped painfully. The memory of Marco's predatory smile and cryptic warning felt like an omen. Now, minutes past midnight, she had to wonder, had Marco been the one who lured her here? A faint scuff of a footstep echoed in the garage, snapping Lauren fully to the here and now. She pressed herself behind a concrete pillar, every muscle tensed. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was there with her. Lauren's memory drifted further back, to months before she ever stepped foot in the Moretti mansion, to a time of harsh fluorescence and antiseptic smells not, unlike the clinic corridor, only it was a hospital ICU where her world had shattered. She stood at her mother's bedside, clutching her hand, as the heart monitor flatlined in a single unending tone. Brittany's sobs were a faint echo at the edge of Lauren's awareness. She felt as though her own heart had stopped, alongside her mother's, when the nurses gently pried their mother's lifeless hand from Lauren's grasp. She had stared in numb disbelief. In the days that followed, grief was compounded by merciless reality. Lauren sat in a dim corner of their one-bedroom apartment. Papers spread around her, hospital bills, mortgage statements, credit card debts from desperate months of treatment costs. The total was a mountain of impossible numbers. Insurance covered only so much. The rest fell to them. 19-year-old Brittany tried to put on a brave face, offering to quit school and work full-time, but Lauren refused to allow it. She was the older sister. It was her responsibility now to keep a roof over their heads and build a future for Brittany, just as she'd promised their mother in her final hours. Desperation drove Lauren to consider options she'd once never imagined. She spent weeks juggling 2 part-time jobs, barely sleeping, and still the debt collectors called daily. One evening, as she flipped through want ads with bleary eyes, a neighbor mentioned that the Moretti family was looking for new domestic staff. The Morettis, everyone in the city knew that name. Wealthy, powerful, dangerous. Working for them was a gamble. but the pay would be more than any honest job she could find elsewhere, and the Morettis took care of their own. With a sick mother at the time and bills looming, Lauren had felt she had no choice. Swallowing her pride and fear, she applied for the maid position. The day she was accepted, relief and dread warred within her. The salary would cover the loan payments and keep Brittany in school, but it meant immersing herself in the world of a Mafia family. She remembered clutching Brittany in a tight hug that evening, reassuring her younger sister that everything would be okay. It had to be. For 6 months, Lauren kept her head down and endured the subtle terror of serving the Moretti household. She cleaned luxurious rooms while trying to ignore the armed guards pacing the halls. She learned which of the family's associates tipped well and which ones looked at her with unsavory intent. Every day was a quiet battle to stay invisible and safe. She never told Brittany what it was really like. She painted her work in rosy colors over their meager dinners, leaving out the parts about cold-eyed men with guns or the occasional screams that echoed from the dawns office late at night. It was a fragile balance, but Lauren managed until tonight. Tonight, everything was collapsing. The same fear that drove her to the Morettis now pushed her through the darkness of this garage. She had done it all for family, for Brittany's future, and she would not let anyone threaten her sister. If meeting a faceless blackmailer was the cost to keep Brittany safe, she would pay it, come what may. Lauren steeled herself, remembering her mother's kind smile and Brittany's laughter. I have to survive this, she thought, for them, wiping a tear of anger and fear from her cheek. She took a slow step out from behind the pillar. Her phone's screen showed the time glowing. 12:03 a.m. Whoever had summoned her was late, or already here, hidden. Hello? She called softly, her voice echoing off concrete. I'm here. It's me, Lauren. Please. Her plea died in her throat. A shape detached from the shadows behind a parked sedan. Lauren's breath hitched. Before she could react, strong arms grabbed her from behind. A large hand clamped over her mouth, smothering her scream. Her phone slipped from her fingers and hit the ground with a clatter. Lauren struggled wildly, kicking back and twisting. But another figure loomed in front of her. Tall, masked, dressed in black. Panic exploded in her chest. She was trapped between two dark shapes. By the faint light of the garage, she caught the glint of a metallic object, a gun, in the second assailant's hand. Her muffled cry reverberated in her skull. She fought with every ounce of strength, but the man behind her was too strong. He lifted her off her feet as if she were weightless. Lauren's shoes flailed a few inches above the concrete. Got her! A low voice hissed from behind the ski mask of the man in front. It was a voice she didn't recognize, deep, curt, and dripping with malice. Lauren's heart thundered. This wasn't a prank or a mere warning, this was an attack. They had come for her. Her vision blurred with tears as she realized with dawning horror what was happening. In that moment, as her scream died against the palm of her attacker's hand, Lauren understood that everything she'd sacrificed and struggled for was in peril. The life she had built for Brittany and herself was about to be torn apart by violence. She had always feared. Lauren's muffled scream vanished into the emptiness of the garage. As the masked men dragged her into the shadows, Lauren's world dissolved into chaos. She thrashed in her captor's unyielding grip, but the masked man behind her only tightened his hold, his arm like a vice around her ribs. The second assailant, tall and broad-shouldered, rushed forward as the first hauled her off her feet. Before Lauren could scream again, the man behind her snarled a curse and slammed her forward onto the hood of a parked car. Lauren's cheek hit metal with stunning force, stars bursting in her vision. In seconds, they had her sprawled on her back atop the hood, limbs pinned. Through hazy sight, she caught a glimpse of one attacker's eyes behind his. Mask, dark, pitiless. "Stop fighting!" growled the one restraining her, his breath hot against her ear through the knit of his mask. Lauren's answer was a frantic elbow jab into his side. She heard a grunt of pain. It only earned her a swift, vicious response. The man shoved her down harder, knocking the breath from her lungs. The second man climbed onto the hood and straddled Lauren's kicking legs. Terror gave her a last surge of strength. Lauren clawed at the hand pinning her shoulder and managed to twist partially free. "Help!" she screamed into the cavernous garage, her voice cracking with panic. "Help me!" A gloved hand clamped over her mouth again, cutting off her cry. The echo of it died, unheard by anyone who could save her. The garage entrance was too far, and the estate grounds above were likely empty at this late hour. Her mind raced desperately, even as her body was slammed back down. Is this because of the Morettis? Did I anger someone? Who are they? 1,000 questions and no answers, only raw fear. The man looming over her pressed a forearm against Lauren's collarbone, pinning her in place. She felt the muzzle of a gun trace threateningly along her jawline. "Don't scream again," he hissed. Lauren went rigid, eyes wide in terror. Behind the mask, the man's gaze burned into hers. Slowly, he removed his hand from her mouth. She was trembling so violently the car hood vibrated beneath her. A whimper climbed up her throat, but she bit it back, afraid any sound might set them off. The leader, the one holding the gun, nodded once to his partner. "Keep her quiet," he ordered in a low, distorted voice. The partner shifted, and in that movement, Lauren saw the glint of a large gold ring on his finger. Before she could register it, pain cracked across the side of her skull. The man had struck her with the butt of his pistol. Lauren's head snapped to the side, a ringing filling her ears. Dazed, she felt herself being dragged off the hood of the car. Her knees buckled as her feet hit the ground. The metallic taste of blood flooded her mouth. She'd bitten her tongue. Through swimming vision, she realized the man behind her was ripping something, the fabric of her uniform tearing with a sickening reap. Cold air brushed the newly exposed skin of her back and shoulders. "No, please," she choked out, finding her voice for one last plea. It fell on deaf ears. A rough hand shoved her face down over the hood again. What followed was a series of nightmarish flashes, ripping cloth, searing pain, Lauren's own scream, echoing in her ears until merciful darkness finally swallowed her mind. She didn't recall how she got home that night. Only fragmentary images remained. Crawling across the garage floor after the men vanished, the sensation of warm blood trickling down her inner thigh, the startled gasp of her sister upon finding Lauren battered and half-conscious at the apartment door. Hours later, Lauren awoke on her own sofa, swathed in blankets. Every inch of her body throbbed with pain. Brittany had cleaned the cuts on her face and persuaded a local physician, the Moretti family doctor, Dr. Russo, to come see her before dawn, under the pretense of a street mugging. Lauren remembered Dr. Russo's gentle yet concerned face as he stitched a gash on her forehead. He asked if she wanted to report the attack to the police. Lauren gripped his arm and begged him not to tell a soul, her voice breaking. The kindly doctor agreed, albeit reluctantly. He probably assumed her plea was born of trauma, or fear of retaliation. He wasn't wrong. During the examination, Dr. Russo frowned at a distinct bruise on Lauren's left hip, a deep, purplish imprint of something with a unique shape. "Strange mark," he murmured. "Like a ring or a signet pressed into the skin," but Lauren was too delirious with pain and exhaustion to pay attention. She drifted in and out of awareness as he finished bandaging her and left a bottle of painkillers on the nightstand. In the weeks that followed, the physical wounds slowly faded, but the nightmare of that night never left Lauren. She returned to work after a few days, concealing her trauma behind long sleeves and concealer, whispers among the staff about her. Bruises were quietly silenced by Maria's stern glare. The senior maid helped spin the story that Lauren had been mugged on her way home. The staff accepted it in polite silence, and no one dared press her for details. She was grateful because lies were all she had to offer. Each day she lived in fear that her attackers might return to finish what they started. Then one morning, about 6 weeks after the attack, Lauren bolted from bed at dawn with a wave of nausea. She barely made it to the bathroom in time. As she knelt by the toilet, body shaking, a terrible realization struck her. Her monthly cycle was late, very late. Her hands trembled the entire way to the pharmacy for a test. And when the little plastic stick confirmed her fears, Lauren sank to the bathroom floor and wept until she had no tears left. She was pregnant. That night, Lauren stared at the ceiling of her bedroom, one hand protectively over her still flat abdomen. Who was the father? One of those masked monsters. Possibly the one who had spoken? The thought made her stomach turn. A part of her, deep down, suspected the ugly truth she refused to voice. Someone had orchestrated the attack. Someone who knew her routines. Perhaps even knew about Brittany. But she had no proof. Only a gnawing dread that the danger was far from over. One thing was certain. She would carry this child and protect it with her life. Just as fiercely as she protected her sister. But how could she ever explain? Unwed and visibly pregnant, working under the roof of Giovanni Moretti, rumors would explode. Questions she couldn't answer would be asked. So Lauren made the only choice she felt she had. She kept the pregnancy secret. Through fall and into winter, Lauren hid the growing evidence beneath baggy uniforms and avoided any situation that might reveal her condition. She never breathed a word of the truth to anyone. Not to Brittany, who believed her sister had survived a random mugging. Not to Dr. Russo when he kindly inquired about her well-being. Certainly not to the Morettis or the staff. She bore it alone, heart heavy with fear and resolve. She never told anyone, until now. Bright morning light filtered in, through tinted car windows as Giovanni's black sedan sped away from the private clinic. In the back seat, Giovanni sat beside Lauren, who cradled her newborn tightly. An uncomfortable silence filled the car's plush interior. Giovanni's mind churned with unanswered questions and a rising storm of anger. Minutes ago, the world as he knew it shifted. His quiet maid had been hiding a baby under his very nose, and someone had clearly hurt her. The evidence was in the bruises on Lauren's face and the haunted look in her eyes. Giovanni had ordered his driver to take them back to the mansion immediately, cutting off the panicked flutter of nurses at the clinic who insisted Lauren needed rest. Rest could wait. He needed answers first. Giovanni broke the silence, his voice low but seething. "Start talking, Lauren." He kept his eyes forward, but his fists were clenched on his knees. "Who did this to you? Who is the father of that child?" Lauren's throat felt like sandpaper. She rocked the drowsy infant gently, trying to soothe them as much as herself. "Sir, Every time she opened her mouth, the words tangled. How could she possibly say it? "Your brother violated me and now I have his baby." The truth lodged in her chest like broken glass. Giovanni exhaled sharply through his nose when she trailed off. He turned to face her fully. "Look at me." The quiet command carried more force than a shout. Lauren forced herself to meet his steel-gray eyes. There was fury in them, yes, but also concern that bordered on fear. It startled her. She had never seen Giovanni Moretti look afraid of anything. Perhaps he wasn't afraid for himself now, but for her, and for the implications of someone daring to attack one of his own within his domain. Was it someone from inside our circle? Giovanni pressed. "A staff member? Did an outsider get onto my property?" Lauren pressed her lips together until they blanched. The baby fussed softly, and she bounced it in her arms. I was attacked, sir," she whispered finally. "Late one night months ago. In the south garage." Giovanni's eyes flashed. The south garage on his property. His jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. "They were masked," Lauren continued, voice trembling. "I didn't see their faces. After that, I didn't know what to do. I was afraid." Giovanni's glare softened a fraction as Lauren's voice cracked. He looked at the infant, a tiny bundle of innocence caught in the crossfire of something ugly. "So this child," he said more quietly, "is the result of that attack." Lauren shut her eyes and nodded, fresh tears slipping down her lashes. Admitting it out loud felt like ripping open a wound. Silence fell again, broken only by the quiet rumble of the car's engine. Giovanni leaned back, processing. Lauren could almost see the calculations. Behind his eyes, vengeance forming, like a dark cloud. He took a long breath. "Why didn't you come to me?" he asked, not angrily this time, but with a rough edge of hurt. "You should have come straight to me, Lauren. We could have found the man responsible." Lauren opened her eyes. There was no easy way to explain the mix of terror and distrust that had kept her silent. "You have every right to be furious with me," she said hoarsely. "I was ashamed and scared. The men who did it, they threatened my sister's life. They said if I talked, Brittany would suffer. I believed them. This wasn't the full truth. The threat had come before the assault. Not after, but she grasped at anything to justify her silence." Giovanni's jaw clenched. "So you stayed quiet to protect your sister," he muttered, rubbing a hand over his mouth. He absorbed her words, face grim. When he spoke again, his voice had a deadly calm. "Whoever did this will pay." Lauren managed to look at him in surprise. Giovanni's expression hardened into resolve. He raised stakes to an oath. "No one is going to harm you or this baby ever again. I swear it on my life." Lauren's breath caught. There was such conviction in his oath that she almost believed it. Despite all her doubts, Giovanni Moretti was a man known for his iron control. But here he was, promising protection to a maid and a baby. The situation was surreal. The car pulled through the wrought iron gates of the Moretti estate. Guards on the ground snapped to alertness as the sedan came to a halt in front of the mansion. Giovanni exited first. "Follow me," he said firmly. He led Lauren directly into a lavish guest suite in the east wing of the mansion. Within minutes, clean linens were on the bed and a bassinet was brought in for the baby. Giovanni issued sharp orders and guards were posted at the door. By the time the flurry of activity settled, Lauren sat weakly on a velvet sofa while her baby dozed in a cushioned crib. Giovanni dismissed the remaining staff and stood before her, ensuring she was as secure as possible. Finally, the bustle quieted. The baby slept, and 2 armed guards took their positions outside the suite. In the gentle lamplight, Giovanni approached Lauren gingerly. He had been nothing but authoritative and cold since she'd known him, but now his demeanor softened. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "Both of you." Lauren exhaled, a tear of relief slipping free. "Thank you," she whispered. "You should rest," Giovanni advised, moving to the door. She couldn't help but call after him, voice trembling. "Please be careful, sir. They threaten my family. They'll do anything." His silhouette paused in the doorway. "No one threatens my family, Lauren," he replied firmly. "Get some sleep. We'll speak later." Then he stepped into the hall, closing the door behind him. As the lock clicked and his footsteps retreated, Lauren let out a shaky breath. She glanced at her sleeping baby, gently touching the infant's tiny fingers. Secrets lay between them like a chasm, the identity of the baby's father, the dark truth of that night. Giovanni had promised protection. But how long could this fragile peace last if he didn't know the whole story? Lauren sank back against the sofa. For the first time in months, she wasn't looking over her shoulder or sleeping on a knife's edge of fear. She was safe for now, but her mind wouldn't quiet. In Giovanni's position, would someone else have made the same choices she did? Would you keep such a secret too, if it meant protecting the ones you love? Giovanni shut the door of the guest suite gently behind him, but inside his mind was anything but calm. As Lauren and the baby finally rested under guard, he moved through the mansion with purpose. Fury and guilt propelled him, fury at the unknown predator who had violated his territory, and guilt that it had happened on his watch. He found Angelo, his silver-haired consigliere, in the study reviewing financial ledgers. Giovanni wasted no time. "We have a situation," he said in a low growl as he closed the study door. "Someone attacked Lauren on our grounds some months back." She kept it quiet. Angelo's eyes widened in shock behind his wire-rimmed glasses. "Dio mio, the maid? On our grounds?" "Giovanni, I never heard a whisper." "Neither did I," Giovanni snapped, pacing like a caged tiger. He quickly relayed a sanitized version. Lauren had been assaulted in the south. Garage late one night, and now there was a child as a result. Angelo crossed himself, face grim. "We need to find who did it," Giovanni went on, quietly. "I don't want the rest of the household, or our rivals catching wind of this before I have the bastard in hand." Angelo nodded, recovering his composure. Efficiency overtook his surprise. "Where do we start?" "With our own security records," Giovanni said, already heading for the small monitoring room adjacent to the study. Inside, a wall of screens showed live feeds from cameras around the estate. Giovanni jabbed at the keyboard, pulling up archived footage from roughly 6 months ago, the night Lauren mentioned. "Here," he muttered, pointing at the timeline. In the video feed list, the camera covering the south garage, entrance showed a gap, exactly as Lauren had implied. The recording cut out at 11:47 p.m. and resumed at 12:15 a.m. Angelo peered at the anomaly. "A blackout?" Giovanni's lips pressed into a thin line. "Someone disabled it, likely manually. They knew where our blind spots were and when to strike." Anger simmered in his gut. This suggested an inside job, or at least help from someone with intimate knowledge of Moretti security. "I'll have the tech team pull the server logs," Angelo said. "Maybe we'll see if the system was tampered with or if any IDs accessed that area." Giovanni gave a curt nod. "Do it. And quietly, Angelo. I don't want Marco or anyone else asking questions yet." At the mention of Marco, Giovanni's stomach tightened. His brother had been away on and off over the past year expanding some nightclub business downtown. Marco often came and went at odd hours, including possibly that night. But Giovanni pushed aside the personal suspicion for now. He needed evidence. "We should also speak with anyone who interacted with Lauren after the attack," Angelo suggested carefully. "If she didn't tell us, perhaps she confided in someone. Lauren had explicitly said she told no one except a doctor." That thought made Giovanni snap his fingers. The family doctor. He treated her injuries, Lauren had mentioned. Dr. Russo had been the one to stitch her up before dawn that night. Within the hour, Giovanni was driving to Dr. Russo's private clinic downtown, not waiting for formalities. The middle-aged physician met him in a small exam room, looking nervous. It wasn't every day the Moretti patriarch showed up unannounced, face like thunder. "Dr. Russo," Giovanni greeted, voice smooth but cold. "I believe you recall treating one of my employees some months back." "Lauren." It wasn't a question. Dr. Russo swallowed and nodded. Yes, Don Moretti, she said she'd been mugged. I gave her a few stitches and checked for a concussion. I wanted to call you at the time, but she begged me not to." He trailed off under Giovanni's hard stare. "What can you tell me about her injuries?" Giovanni asked, getting straight to the point. The physician dabbed his brow with a handkerchief. "Aside from cuts and bruises, there was evidence of a sexual assault." He said it delicately, eyes downcast. "I kept things confidential as she requested. But one detail did strike me as odd." Giovanni's pulse ticked. "Go on." Dr. Russo picked up his pen, fidgeting with it. There was a distinct bruise on her left hip. A very specific shape, round with an imprint, almost like a signet ring might make. "I thought it unusual. It bore a pattern almost like a crest." He cleared his throat. "I mentioned it, but Lauren was in a state. She didn't offer any explanation." Giovanni went very still. A crest, a signet ring. Ice trickled through his veins. In their world, many men wore heavy rings, but a family crest was a deeply personal marker. The Moretti crest, for example, was an M entwined with a rose and dagger. Giovanni himself wore no such ornament, but Marco, his mind flashed to the gold ring forever perched on Marco's right hand. Their father had gifted it to Marco on his 21st birthday. Giovanni remembered teasing his brother that he wore it even to sleep. If Dr. Russo's description was accurate, the bruise on Lauren's skin could very well have matched that very design. "Thank you, doctor," Giovanni said quietly, masking the turmoil seething inside. He placed a heavy hand on the man's shoulder. "You did right by keeping this private. Continue to do so." "Understood?" Dr. Russo bobbed his head quickly. "Of course, Don Moretti. I hope the young lady is all right. And the baby? They're under my protection now," Giovanni said simply. With a final nod, he turned and left the clinic, heart pounding. He sat in his car for a long moment, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles. The pieces were falling into place in the most horrifying way. Could his own brother be behind this atrocity? The very thought made Giovanni feel physically ill. But he needed more than a bruise and a gut feeling. He needed proof. As dusk fell, Giovanni returned to the estate. He headed straight for Marco's quarters on the second floor, jaw set. Marco had been out all day, supposedly, handling club business. Giovanni used the spare key he possessed as head of the family to slip into his brother's suite. The room smelled faintly of expensive cologne and cigars, the curtains half drawn. Giovanni's gaze swept over the tidy bedroom and froze on the dresser top. There, carelessly left among some scattered cash and cufflinks, gleamed a heavy gold ring emblazoned with the Moretti crest. Marco's ring. Giovanni approached it slowly, anger thrumming in his veins. He picked up the ring and turned it over under the lamp. A drop of his own. Blood could not have confirmed his suspicions more clearly. The pattern matched. Dr. Russo's description exactly, down to the flourish of the tiny rose and dagger. Giovanni closed his fist around the ring, knuckles whitening. His brother, his own flesh and blood, was now the prime suspect in the violation of Lauren and the fathering of her secret child. In that chilling moment, Giovanni Moretti realized a terrible truth. The enemy he had been hunting was within his very family. And nothing would ever be the same. The following evening, Giovanni and Marco sat at opposite ends of the long mahogany dining table in the mansion's formal dining room. A sumptuous dinner had been laid out by the chefs. Roasted lamb, fresh pasta, red wine, yet neither brother showed much appetite. An oppressive silence clung to the clink of silverware and china. Lauren hovered just out of sight in the hallway. Unable to stay away despite her better judgment, she clutched her baby to her chest, bouncing the infant gently as she peered through the cracked doorway. Giovanni had insisted she remain upstairs under guard, but after hours of restless anxiety, she had ventured down under the pretense of checking the kitchen for tea. Now she found herself eavesdropping. Inside, Giovanni dabbed his mouth with a napkin and broke the silence. "You're unusually quiet tonight, Marco," he said, voice cool. Marco leaned back in his chair, swirling the wine in his goblet. He was dressed sharply as ever, but there were dark circles under his eyes and an almost twitchy energy about him. He offered a thin smile. "Just enjoying my meal. Fratello." Giovanni set his jaw at the casual fraternal address. "I'm surprised you're not out entertaining clients. Isn't that what you do most nights?" There was an edge beneath his polite tone. Marco's smile tightened. "I cleared my evening. Figured I should spend some time with my dear big brother. It's been a while since we dined together, no?" He took a slow sip of wine, eyes never leaving Giovanni. Giovanni drummed his fingers once on the table, a sign of impatience Lauren had come to recognize. "True, lately our schedules haven't aligned." He paused, then added, "For instance, you weren't home last night." Marco's fingers froze on his wineglass. "Neither were you," he countered smoothly. "I hear you were out early this morning, dealing with some urgent business. Anything I should know about?" Giovanni's face remained impassive. "Routine matters. Nothing for you to worry about." Across the table, Marco chuckled under his breath. "You've always been good at that, keeping me out of the loop. Need-to-know basis, isn't that what you say?" He popped a bite of lamb into his mouth, chewed thoughtfully. "Sometimes I wonder, Gio, if you trust me at all." Lauren's grip on the baby tightened. An uneasy feeling settled in her stomach as she watched Giovanni's expression harden. Giovanni met his brother's gaze head-on. "I trust family who earn trust," he said. "Lately, I'm not sure where we stand." Marco let out a short, sarcastic laugh. "Perhaps because you insist on standing above everyone else." His voice dripped bitterness. "We're brothers, but you still treat me like one of your soldati expected, to report my every move." Giovanni's chair scraped as he pushed back slightly. "If you think running clubs and glad-handing VIPs gives you free rein to ignore our family's protocols, you're mistaken." "Protocols." Marco practically spat the word. "You mean your rules, your leash around my neck." A heavy silence fell. Lauren's heart hammered. Even the baby squirmed as if sensing the tension. She began to retreat down the hall, afraid that at any moment one of the brothers might say something to shatter their fragile civility, or notice her listening. Before either man could speak again, a knock came at the dining room door. One of Giovanni's senior soldiers, Enzo, stepped in, inclining his head apologetically. "Pardon the interruption, boss." Giovanni's eyes snapped to the doorway, and Lauren flattened herself against the corridor wall out of sight. "This better be important," Giovanni said, displeasure evident in the tightness of his voice. Enzo cleared his throat. "We received a phone call. An anonymous caller on the secure line. They, made a threat." Giovanni stood at once, all his focus on Enzo. "What threat? Speak clearly." Enzo glanced uneasily at Marco, then back to his boss. "It was about the baby, sir. They said, tell Giovanni his little secret won't be safe for long." And then he hesitated, visibly uncomfortable relaying the message. "Then, if he doesn't back off, the baby will disappear." Lauren's blood ran cold. She hugged her infant protectively, a soft gasp escaping her lips before she could stop it. "Back off? The baby will disappear?" Her mind reeled. Inside the dining room, Giovanni's face darkened into pure wrath. "What number did it trace to?" he demanded. "Burner cell phone," Enzo replied. "Untraceable, but the call pinged off a tower on the north side of the city." Marco rose slowly from his seat, feigning confusion. "Baby? What baby is this about, Fratello?" he asked, attempting a light tone that didn't reach his eyes. Giovanni ignored him for the moment, issuing rapid orders to Enzo. "Double the guards on the gate and around the East Wing suite. Lock the estate down now. No one in or out without my approval." Enzo nodded curtly and withdrew to carry out the commands. Marco stepped around the table, approaching Giovanni with open palms. "Giovanni, what's happening? What baby are they talking about?" Giovanni finally looked at his brother, and in his eyes, Lauren could see the barely contained fury. For a split second, she feared he would lunge at Marco right then and there. But Giovanni mastered himself. He adjusted his cuffs and grabbed his phone from the table. "It's family business, Marco. I'll handle it." Marco's jaw clenched. "Family business? If someone's threatening our family, I deserve to know." "You'll know when I choose to tell you," Giovanni snapped, authority ringing in each syllable. He was already striding out of the dining room, brushing past his brother without another glance. Marco stood there, fists balled at his sides, face a storm of emotions: anger, frustration, and if Lauren saw correctly from her hidden vantage, a flicker of alarm. Lauren backed away down the corridor, her heart in her throat. Giovanni's orders echoed through the mansion as security personnel rushed to their posts, cradling her baby. Lauren hurried upstairs before she could be caught in the crossfire of whatever was coming. The anonymous threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. Someone out there knew about her child and had promised that by morning the baby might be gone. Midnight thundered in a downpour. Rain lashed against the mansion's windows as Lauren paced her guest suite, struggling to lull her wide-awake baby back to sleep. 2 guards stood outside in the hall, their presence both reassuring and ominous. Downstairs, the household was on high alert after the anonymous threat. Lights on in every corridor, additional men patrolling the grounds. Lightning flashed, illuminating the plush nursery corner where Lauren gently rocked the infant. "Shh, it's okay," she whispered, trying to convince herself as much as the child. Her nerves were shot. Every clap of thunder felt like an ill omen. A sudden pop, pop, pop of gunfire cracked through the sound of rain. Lauren froze. The guards outside her door shouted in surprise. Before she could react, the door burst open and one of her guards staggered in, bleeding from a shoulder wound. "Stay down, miss," he shouted at Lauren, drawing his pistol with his good arm. Chaos erupted. Dark-clad figures swarmed behind the injured guard. 3, 4, maybe more masked intruders. They moved with lethal intent, firing suppressed rounds that hissed through the suite. The wounded guard returned fire, driving 2 attackers back momentarily, but a third slammed into him full force. They crashed into a side table, sending a lamp shattering to the floor. "Hand over the baby," one of the men barked, his voice muffled by a black balaclava. Lauren's heart lurched. She clutched her child and backed against the wall, shaking her head frantically. The intruder lunged at Lauren. In desperation, she hurled a decorative porcelain vase at him. It smashed against the man's chest, buying her seconds. Suddenly, one of Giovanni's guards rushed in and barreled into the attacker, knocking him off balance. "Go now," the guard bellowed to Lauren. Another intruder charged into the suite from the hall, raising a pistol. The corridor flickered with emergency lights as gunfire erupted from all sides. The guard shielding Lauren fired back, and the masked gunman fell with a cry. "Come on," the guard snarled, grabbing Lauren's arm. She cradled her wailing baby and let him yank her toward the door. They sprinted into the corridor. At the end of the hall, 2 masked figures appeared, cutting them off. One masked assailant lunged forward and wrenched the wailing baby out of Lauren's arms with brute force. "No!" Lauren screamed, reaching out in vain. The guard seized Lauren around the shoulders and bodily shoved her into a linen closet. "Stay here," he hissed. Before she could protest, he slammed the door, and his rapid footsteps and shouts lured the attackers away down the hall. Heart in her throat, Lauren crouched in the darkness, alone and trembling. Gunshots rang out in the distance and thunder boomed overhead. She pressed a hand over her mouth to stifle her sobs, mind racing in terror. "Giovanni, please save my baby," she prayed desperately. Downstairs, Giovanni had been in the security room when the alarm blared. Seeing the intruders on the surveillance monitors, he sprinted upstairs with deadly focus. He arrived on the landing, just as a masked man disappeared, down the main staircase, with a small bundle in his arms, the baby. Rage surged through Giovanni. He took aim but didn't have a clear shot. One stray bullet could hit the infant. An accomplice at the foot of the stairs unleashed a spray of cover fire upward, forcing Giovanni to duck behind the banister. By the time he regained sight of the foyer, the front doors were slamming open. The kidnappers rushed out into the raging storm with the wailing baby. Giovanni lunged down the remaining stairs. Rain blew in through the open doors, slicking the marble foyer. Outside on the front drive, a dark van peeled away, tires spitting mud. Not hesitating, Giovanni leapt into the nearest vehicle, a black SUV idling by the entry with a petrified chauffeur inside. "Out!" he barked. The driver scrambled into the rain. Giovanni slid into the driver's seat and slammed the door. He jammed the SUV into gear and tore off after the van, wheels skidding on the slick driveway. The city streets beyond the estate were awash with water. Sheets of rain slashed across the windshield, nearly blinding him, but Giovanni kept the van's taillights in view. He fished out his phone and hit speed dial. "They have the baby in a black van," he barked as soon as Angelo picked up. Heading west toward the old industrial district, sirens were already wailing in the distance. Moretti reinforcements or perhaps the police. It didn't matter. The chase careened through narrow, flooded streets. The van ahead swerved recklessly around a corner, sending up a plume of oily rainwater. Giovanni tightened his grip on the wheel and followed. He was gaining on them, another 2 blocks, and he could try to cut them off. Suddenly, a muzzle flashed from the van's back window. Bang! Bang! Bullets pinged off the hood of Giovanni's SUV. He cursed and ducked, low as one spiderwebbed, the windshield inches from his head. He didn't slow. Up ahead, the van's driver must have realized Giovanni wouldn't be shaken. The vehicle took a hard turn into an industrial side street flanked by warehouses. Giovanni followed into the maze of narrow lanes. The rain here fell even harder, if possible, hammering on the roof. The van skidded around a blind turn, and too late, Giovanni saw the trap. A construction dumpster lay tipped across the alley, likely left there deliberately. The van narrowly slipped past it. But when Giovanni tried to follow, the SUV's fender smashed into the heavy bin with a teeth-rattling crunch. Metal crumpled. The impact jolted Giovanni forward violently. Only his seatbelt kept him from slamming into the steering wheel. He roared in frustration and threw the SUV into reverse, tires spinning in the flood of rain. By the time he maneuvered free of the obstacle, the van was nothing but a receding blur of red taillights and darkness. They were getting away. Not yet, Giovanni vowed. He abandoned the crippled SUV and sprang out into the storm. Cold rain drenched him instantly. Up ahead, he could just make out the van's lights turning onto a main road. On foot, he couldn't hope to catch it, but perhaps he didn't need to. He strained to see through the downpour when a new sound cut through the rain. A sharp crack of gunfire somewhere close by. Giovanni raised his pistol and crept forward on foot, following the alley where the van had momentarily stopped. The rain muted visibility and sound, but through the cascading water he saw a dark shape lying on the alley pavement. It was one of the masked intruders. The man was sprawled on his back, motionless, rain pooling around him. Giovanni approached warily, nudging the man's gun away with his foot. A single gunshot wound oozed blood from the man's chest, a fatal shot, expertly placed. Giovanni's pulse pounded. He hadn't fired this shot, and the angle of entry, it looked like it came from above. A sniper from a rooftop, perhaps. Who had taken this man out? One of Giovanni's own? Unlikely. His men weren't yet in position here. An enemy cleaning up loose ends then. Teeth gritted. Giovanni knelt and inspected the dead assailant's pockets for any clue. Nothing. No wallet, no phone, no identifying marks on his clothing. These men were ghosts. But as he leaned over the body, Giovanni noticed something gleaming on the ground. A shell casing, partially submerged in a puddle, right beside where the attacker fell. He plucked it up and held it to a flash of lightning. It was a pistol casing, the caliber and make ringing disturbingly familiar. Giovanni had seen casings like this at the private shooting range he and Marco frequented. In fact, Marco's favorite handgun, a custom-engraved, human-used distinctive brass like this, with a rare foreign head stamp that Marco special ordered by the case. Recognition thundered through Giovanni louder than the storm. This was no ordinary thug's bullet casing. This was Marco's ammunition. Clutching the wet casing in his fist, Giovanni stood in the rain, breath coming hard. The van and the baby were gone. One kidnapper lay dead at his feet, courtesy of a bullet that pointed to his own brother. Through the veil of rain, Giovanni lifted his face to the sky, fury and heartbreak twisting inside him. Marco, he growled under his breath, the name tasting like bile. Whatever game his brother was playing, it just turned into open war. The mansion's drawing room was dim and silent in the early hours before dawn. Rain still pounded against the windows in a relentless torrent. Lauren, holding her reclaimed baby, stood waiting anxiously in the foyer the moment Giovanni stepped through the door. Their eyes met, and Lauren burst into grateful tears. Giovanni managed a weary smile as Lauren approached. He gently placed a hand on the baby's back, confirming for himself that the child was truly safe. "He's all right," Giovanni murmured. "It's over." Enzo and the other men filed in behind their boss, carrying the weight of the long night with them. They exchanged glances, respect, and relief, as they moved off to secure the property and get medical attention for minor wounds. Lauren could see Giovanni was swaying on his feet. "You're hurt," she said softly, noting the bandaged gash on his shoulder and the cuts and bruises along his arms and face. "I'm fine," Giovanni replied, voice low and rough with fatigue. His gaze rested on the baby in Lauren's arms, The boy stared up at him with curious eyes. As if recognizing his savior, Giovanni gently brushed a fingertip across the baby's cheek, then looked back at Lauren. "And you? Are you all right?" Lauren nodded through her tears. "We are now. Because of you." Giovanni gave a slight shake of his head. "Because of us." "You were brave, Lauren. Braver than anyone should ever have to be." He hesitated. Emotions he usually kept buried threatening to surface. In that hesitation, Lauren stepped forward and wrapped her free arm around Giovanni, pulling him into a fierce, grateful embrace. For a heartbeat, Giovanni stiffened, unaccustomed to such open affection. Then he let out a shuddering breath and returned the embrace gently, mindful of the baby between them. In that quiet moment, something shifted. A new bond, forged in hardship and trust, settled between Lauren and the Mafia Don who had nearly lost everything to protect her. A discreet cough sounded by the stairway. Angelo stood there, hat in hand. "Don," he said softly, "we've received confirmations. Your brother, Marco, is missing. No body found." Giovanni pulled back from Lauren, squaring his shoulders. He had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed still sent a complicated pang through him. Missing. Not dead, at least not confirmed. The news whispered through the estate like a chill breeze. By morning, Marco Moretti was missing. "Understood," Giovanni answered Angelo. The consigliere nodded and withdrew, leaving the small family in the foyer. Lauren searched Giovanni's face. She saw sorrow there, and relief, and the heavy cost of a terrible decision. "I'm sorry," she whispered, unsure what else to say about the brother lost to darkness. Giovanni closed his eyes briefly. "So am I." When he opened them again, he focused on the tiny bundle in Lauren's arms. Carefully, he reached out and took the baby from her, cradling the infant with surprising tenderness. Lauren watched as Giovanni pressed a kiss to the baby's forehead. A vow sealed in that gentle gesture. "You saved him," Lauren said, a tremor in her voice. "You saved us both." Giovanni met her gaze steadily. "He's family," he replied simply. "And so are you, if you'll allow it." Lauren's breath hitched. In those words, she heard everything Giovanni wasn't explicitly saying. That he would claim this child as a Moretti, raise him as his own if need be. That Lauren would never again be just a maid in the shadows of this house, but someone under his personal protection, perhaps more. Tears of gratitude brightened her eyes. I don't know how to thank you," she managed. A faint, tired smile touched Giovanni's lips. "You owe me no thanks." He gently helped Lauren to her feet. "Enzo will escort you to the safe house. Brittany's already there waiting for you," Lauren realized. Giovanni had anticipated her compliance. Her sister was likely scooped up by Moretti men immediately after the threat. Despite everything, gratitude welled up. "Thank you," she whispered. Giovanni merely nodded. He walked her to the door where 2 soldiers waited to take her. Before letting her go, Giovanni paused, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper meant only for her. "I won't rest until your baby is back in your arms and Marco answers for what he's done. That's a promise." Lauren believed him. As she was led away, she cast one last look at Giovanni Moretti. He stood stiff and deadly, like an avenging angel in a tailored suit, ready to rain justice on his own blood. This was the calm before a storm. Night had given way to a sullen gray dawn by the time Giovanni's fleet of black SUVs screeched to a halt outside an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Lauren wasn't there. She remained under guard at a safe house with Brittany, but her silent prayers went with the team of armed men fanning out around the derelict building. Giovanni stepped out into the chilly morning air, his face a mask of resolve. Angelo quietly approached. "Inside," the consigliere murmured, gesturing to a side door left ajar. "They're in there, just like our informant said." Giovanni nodded. He held up a fist, signaling his men to advance in formation. Weapons drawn, they slipped through the gap in the rusted door one by one. Giovanni entered first. The warehouse interior was cavernous and dark, lit only by shafts of dawn light filtering through broken windows. Stacked crates and machinery cast long shadows across the concrete floor. Somewhere in that darkness, a baby whimpered. Giovanni's heart lurched at the faint cry. He motioned left, and 2 of his best soldiers peeled off silently to flank the sound. As they moved, a voice rang out from the shadows. "That's far enough." Figures emerged atop a catwalk that ran along the warehouse's Far wall. Half a dozen men in black, aiming rifles down at the intruders. And on the catwalk railing, an infant car seat was zip-tied in place, a small bundle squirming within. Lauren's baby. Giovanni's blood pounded in his ears. He raised his pistol at the leader, a tall, lean man with a Slavic accent who was smirking coldly. "You must be Giovanni Moretti," the man called. "Came to collect your little package, have you? If you harm that child—" "You're a dead man!" Giovanni shouted back, voice echoing. The leader chuckled. "Funny. Your brother said something similar when he hired us. That baby's quite important to a lot of people. It seems." He pressed a rifle barrel to the edge of the car seat. The baby inside let out a thin wail. "Stop!" Giovanni barked, taking a step forward into a beam of light. His men tensed around him, fingers on triggers. "I'm here. Marco's not. Whatever he owes you, I can settle." The man's smile turned into a sneer. "Too late for that. Change of plans." He jerked his head at one of his crew. "Kill him!" Time slowed to a crawl. As the gunman on the catwalk trained his rifle on Giovanni, a shot cracked from below. Angelo had fired first. The rifleman toppled with a cry, dropping his weapon as he fell off the catwalk to the concrete with a bone-crunching thud. In the same instant, all hell broke loose. Muzzle flashes erupted from both ground and catwalk as Moretti. Soldiers and kidnappers exchanged fire. The warehouse echoed with a deafening cacophony of gunshots. Giovanni dove behind a stack of pallets as bullets strafed the space he'd occupied a heartbeat before. Above, one of the mercenaries tried to grab the car seat and run, only to be cut down by a precise shot from Enzo's handgun. Seizing the moment, Giovanni broke cover and sprinted for the metal staircase leading up to the catwalk. A kidnapper jumped in his path, wielding a knife with a snarl. Giovanni parried the slashing blade with his forearm. Pain bit into him, but he ignored it and slammed the butt of his pistol into the man's temple. The attacker crumpled. Giovanni bounded up the stairs 2 at a time. On the catwalk, the leader cursed and fired at him point blank. A burning line grazed Giovanni's left shoulder. He gritted his teeth through the white-hot pain and did not stop. 2 more steps, and he was on the man, knocking the rifle aside with his own body. They grappled perilously close to the railing and the baby. Below, the remaining mercenaries began to fall, either surrendering or lying wounded as Giovanni's men pressed the attack. High above the ground, Giovanni and the leader smashed against the railing. The man was taller, but Giovanni's fury gave him strength. The mercenary swung a wild punch. Giovanni ducked and drove his fist into the man's gut, then followed with an elbow across the jaw. The leader stumbled, dazed. Giovanni grabbed him by the collar. "Who sent you?" he snarled. The man spat blood, laughing even as Giovanni slammed him against the rail. "Someone who isn't done with you, Moretti." Giovanni's eyes blazed. He heaved the mercenary up and over the railing. The man's laughter turned into a scream as he plunged 15 feet onto a stack of crates below. With a brutal crunch, he fell silent, either unconscious or dead. Heart still thundering, Giovanni turned to the car seat. The infant inside was red-faced and howling, but alive and seemingly unharmed. Giovanni dropped his pistol and with shaking hands, cut the plastic ties, binding the seat to the rail. Gently, he lifted the wailing baby out of the carrier. The child's tiny fists beat weakly against his chest, eyes screwed shut in distress. "It's okay, Piccolo," Giovanni murmured, voice thick. He cradled the baby awkwardly but securely, rocking slightly on his heels right there on the catwalk. The baby's cries began to subside into whimpers. "You're safe now." Below, Angelo and the others were securing the few surviving mercenaries and tending to their own wounded. "Boss," Angelo called from the ground. "We have the warehouse clear." Giovanni carefully descended the stairs, baby in his arms. His men looked up in astonishment at the sight of their formidable Don carrying an infant amidst the wreckage of battle. Giovanni's expensive suit was torn and blood-soaked at the shoulder, but he bore it without comment. Angelo stepped forward, relief breaking across his face. Giovanni handed the infant down to him for a moment so he could shrug off his ruined suit jacket. Underneath, his shirt was stained crimson from the gash on his shoulder and other scrapes. He took the baby back, wrapping the cleaner inside of his jacket around the child. The baby promptly grabbed a fistful of Giovanni's shirt and held on, eyes wide and studying the man who had saved him. Giovanni felt an unexpected sting of emotion behind his eyes. He bounced the infant gently. "You're a brave little one," he whispered. His men gathered around, and Enzo let out a triumphant whoop. Giovanni almost managed to smile. Amid the debris and smoke, this tiny life had been saved. And in Giovanni's mind, that made every drop of blood spilled today worth it. As the soldiers began to escort the prisoners out and clear evidence of the firefight, Angelo tapped Giovanni's arm. "Boss, look at this," Angelo held out a scrap of paper he'd retrieved from the infant car seat. Giovanni shifted the baby to one arm and took the note. Scrawled on it in jagged writing were 4 words. "Your brother owes me." Giovanni's eyes narrowed. The anger that had momentarily abated flared anew. This mercenary crew hadn't been working solely for Marco after all. Someone else was pulling strings. Someone to whom Marco was in debt. Giovanni crushed the note in his fist. "Angelo," he said quietly, "send word to our informants. Find out anything and everything about who Marco's been dealing with lately. This isn't over." Angelo nodded gravely. Giovanni gazed down at the baby in his arms, and his expression softened. "But for now, we go home." It was time to reunite, mother and child, and then settle the last score with Marco once and for all. Later that day, as dusk deepened to night once more, Giovanni ventured alone to an old Moretti family hideout on the outskirts of town, an abandoned distillery by the river. It was a place full of ghosts, the site of past deals and secret meetings, known only to family. And Giovanni knew in his bones that Marco would be there. It was where he always went when things went wrong. Giovanni pushed open a dented metal door and stepped into the cavernous space that smelled of stale liquor and mold. A single hanging light bulb cast a weak yellow circle in the center of the room. In that circle stood Marco. Giovanni's younger brother looked far different from the suave club owner he typically presented as. Marco's shirt was wrinkled and smeared with dried blood, whether his own or someone else's. Giovanni didn't know. His face was bruised, a purplish welt swelling one eye, and in his hand dangled a pistol at his side. Marco's eyes snapped up at Giovanni's entrance. For a moment, neither man spoke. They simply regarded each other across a few yards of oil-stained concrete, the silence thick with years of brotherhood and recent betrayal. "You finally came," Marco drawled, breaking the silence. His voice echoed hollowly. "I was beginning to think you'd send your henchmen. Instead, Giovanni took a few steps forward into the light, hands visibly empty. His own gun was tucked at his back. But he intended this to be face-to-face. "Everyone else is busy cleaning up your mess," he said evenly. Marco scoffed, but there was a tremor in it. "My mess? Funny, from where I'm standing. You're the one who ruined everything." "Brother!" Giovanni's temper flared, but he kept it in check. "I'm not the one who raped an innocent woman and tried to steal a child from his own family," he said, each word laced with venom. Marco's jaw tightened. "I did what I had to do. You never understood, Gio. You always had the power, the respect. Father's favorite, the heir, while I was just the charming spare to be, trotted out for parties." He spat on the floor. "I wanted something of my own. Something that would give me leverage. That baby, he was my insurance. My blood raised to eventually take your place, maybe. Or a bargaining chip to trade to our enemies if necessary. The ultimate trump card against you." Giovanni felt sick, hearing the twisted justifications. "You were willing to turn your own child into a pawn? Into a weapon against me?" His hands curled into fists. "And Lauren, she was our employee, a human being under our protection, and you brutalized her. There is no justification for that, Marco." Marco's grip on his pistol tightened, his eyes wild. "Don't you lecture me about protection," he snarled. "If you had really protected me, listened to me, maybe I wouldn't have had to take what should have been mine. The family, the respect, all of it. I was never going to get it as long as you stood in my way." Giovanni shook his head. Slowly, an ache of sadness threading through his anger. "So you betrayed your blood. You put a helpless baby in danger. You allied with scum outside the family. All for some sense of power? And look at where it's brought you. Marco, we've lost men. Our reputation is shaken. And you've lost your soul." "Shut up!" Marco shouted, raising the gun properly now, pointing it at Giovanni's chest. His arm trembled. "You think I've lost? This isn't over. I still have friends. People who owe me, not you. I can rebuild, come back stronger. You should have killed me when you had the chance." "Giovanni." A crazed grin flickered across Marco's battered face. "Maybe I'll disappear for a while, let you think you've won. But I'll be back, and I'll take back what's mine." Giovanni eyed the gun, heart pounding with a mix of sorrow and resolve. He remembered them as boys, playing by the riverbank not far from here. How had it come to this? It doesn't have to end this way, Giovanni said quietly. Marco, put the gun down. Turn yourself into the family council. Maybe Father? Marco laughed bitterly. Father's not here. And if he were, maybe none of this would have happened. His finger moved to the trigger. I'm done talking. Time stretched taut. Giovanni realized with clarity that Marco intended to kill him, or force Giovanni to kill in self-defense. Perhaps that was Marco's final vindication, proving that Big Brother would shed Little Brother's blood. A gunshot exploded, loud as thunder in the enclosed space. For a heartbeat, Giovanni wondered if he'd been hit. He felt nothing. Then he saw Marco stumble backward, a bloom of red spreading on his lower abdomen. Giovanni's own smoking. Pistol was in his hand. He had drawn and fired on instinct. The instant Marco's gun began to rise. Marco dropped to his knees, gun clattering from his hand. He pressed both palms to the gunshot wound in his gut, shock painted on his face. Giovanni rushed forward, kicking Marco's pistol far away. Marco wheezed, a wet, ragged sound. Giovanni hovered uncertainly as blood pooled between them on the floor. Marco looked up at him. Pain and hatred mingled in his gaze. You finally did it, he gasped. Big Brother wins again. Giovanni's eyes burned. He knelt and actually reached out to hold Marco upright by the shoulder. I didn't want this, he said, voice breaking. Marco coughed wetly, a terrible smile on his lips. Liar, you've been waiting. To put me down like a mad dog, Giovanni opened his mouth to deny it, but stopped. Maybe some part of him had wanted exactly that. He didn't know anymore. Sirens, not police, but Moretti vehicles, echoed outside. Giovanni's men were closing in. They must have tracked him here as backup. Marco heard it too. With surprising strength, he grabbed the front of Giovanni's shirt, pulling him closer. His voice was a faint hiss. Finish it, or I swear I'll be back. I'll never stop. Giovanni stared into his brother's eyes, the same gray as his own. He thought of Lauren's terror, of the innocent child Marco would have bartered away. His finger twitched on the trigger once more, then fell away. No, Giovanni whispered. Marco's lips twisted in pain and bitter defeat. Giovanni's gun stayed lowered. He couldn't do it. Seizing that moment, Marco mustered a last burst of strength and staggered into the shadows at the edge of the distillery. By the time Giovanni sprang to his feet and gave chase, Marco had vanished into the night. Outside, beneath the pallid moonlight, Giovanni found only a trail of blood leading to the river's edge. He stared at the dark, swirling water, chest tight with a mix of anguish and grim relief. Marco was gone, perhaps dead in the currents, or perhaps escaped into the ether. Only time would tell. A few of Giovanni's men arrived moments later, flashlights sweeping the area. Giovanni drew a long breath and turned to them, donning the mantle of dawn once more. Marco's gone, he said flatly. Search the river if you want. You won't find him.